Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Christy Taylor, and I want to welcome you to our two-day Mental Health Matters Summit. And I have some great guests over the course of 2 days who will be talking to you about mental health and self-care and creating psychologically safe work environments. So we had a lot of great signups, and so I'm hoping that you tune in and you listen. Don't be afraid to ask questions and throw them in the chat. We'll be sharing a lot of resources along with information about our guests. So we're going to start with day one, which is mental health and self-care to thrive in your career. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick around the room, and we are going to have each guest to introduce themselves. And Kim, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background and what inspires you to do this work.
Hi, Christy. Thanks for having me. I'm known as a pause lady, and I work with high achieving professionals to help you become more successful and happy by doing less. And what got me involved in this is what I'm all about. Is I help really get people connected to themselves so they can actually relieve some of these anxieties and some of the things that they're dealing with, the stresses that they have, so they can actually, just have peace.
Thank you so much, Kim. George, please introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yes, my name is George Brooks. I am the CEO and founder of my nonprofit Meta Association. I'm a public speaker also, and I like to speak about mental illness. And I feel that this topic is especially apropos today because oftentimes those living with mental illness have a hard time finding jobs and hard time sustaining employment. So I'm looking forward to speaking on that today.
All right. And Lisa, thank you for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I am 𝗂𝗂 𝗶𝗄. I'm a licensed clinical social worker based out of Georgia. I'm the owner and founder of the 𝗂𝗲☁ as well as the founder of the nonprofit Endless Ripples. We are a mental health practice and we serve across the lifespan. So I'm excited to share some tips with you guys today.
Thank you so much. Heather, introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Dr. Heather Brown. I'm a TEDx speaker. I'm the author of Speaking with the Heart. I'm a relationship expert and a communication expert, which I think is needed in every single business of the world. And so I'm excited to be here to share some of my tips and techniques with all of you.
Thank you so much. And Fred, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Fred Ruttman. I'm the author of the medical trauma memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times, because that's actually what happened to me. And it earned me the nickname Repeatedly Dead Fred. So I have a podcast and my book out, and I'm just happy to share with people anything that I can that will help them along whatever journey they're experiencing.
Well, Fred, actually, our first question is going to go to you. And before we even start, I want to say again, thank you for all of our speakers tonight for joining us. Thank you to all the guests who will be tuning in across all of our multiple platforms. We will be sharing our speakers' information in the chat throughout the event. We also have a link to the summit webpage where you'll be able to connect with our speakers directly. We've loaded their information there, as well as listen to a playback from tonight's event. And we hope that you not only attend tonight, but also tomorrow. Now, why did we throw this event? Because we know that 1 in 4 individuals suffer from some form of mental health, right? And then May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and there is a lot of stigma associated with mental health. So what you're going to see tonight is, yes, I'll be directing some questions to each of the specific guests based on their expertise, and they'll be sharing their stories and experiences. But this will be an organic conversation where we're bouncing off of each other and answering your questions in the chat regarding mental health. So the first question actually goes to Fred. And, when we talk about the stigma associated with mental health and some of the challenges, we know that 1 in 4 people, again, suffer from some form of mental health disparity. Can you share your personal story and how you approach mental health and self-care in your own professional life? Tell us a little bit about your background and what got you here.
So initially, I was supposed to be a superstar in the corporate world. So I have an MBA in finance and marketing, and that was my career path. Ultimately, I ended up as a college professor. If you want to see mental health issues, just try teaching a college class.
Been there, done that.
But yeah, when I got sick in 2009, which is when I went through my first bouts of being dead, it's a real mental health interrupter and a career disruptor. And there was really no path given to me by my medical professionals for how to recover from all this. I had dozens of concussions, post-traumatic stress, post-concussion syndrome, and everything just got layered. And all anybody wanted to talk about was how to look after my heart. So while that's really important, and emotionally, having a heart is important, but having some mental health and capability to be functional in the world is the most important thing. And I really had to create my own roadmap, and it included trying to do learning, things that I had never tried to learn before, and get my brain refunctioning, and get all that BDNF factors, those brain-derived neurotrophic factors, going, and exercising, and just trying everything I could until I found somebody who could help me get on a better path.
You mentioned about having your own roadmap. I want to throw this to Kim to kind of give some feedback and share a little bit of her story too, because all of you kind of have something in common, right? So Kim, I'm going to bounce this to you to make comment, and then I'll ask you the next question. And then anybody else, feel free to jump in, right? I know all of you want to share your stories, and we'll make sure that happens. But I just feel like, Fred, Kim, I know your story, so I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to bounce off of Fred there.
Yeah. So, I mean, really this is exactly the story where the pause comes in, right? And that is where what I actually have learned and discovered is, and this is really what the trenches caused me to actually dive into, is there was a young man that actually at 16, he was a football player and very promising, and he was going to get a scholarship, and he had gone on social media and he found a girlfriend, and it turned out it was some older man. And he didn't know what to do about it. And guess what he did? He committed suicide. And that was my pivotal moment to say, we need to take a pause. I need to get this movement out there. I took about 10 years ago, I took about a whole year off of social media and also off of my phone. And this was when the phone was actually very active and you had to have it. And I just put some boundaries around it. And that's really, really, really key. And that's really the first step in the whole process. And I know, Chris, you're going to ask more questions about this. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay. Any other comments on this particular topic? All of you will be sharing, but I just want to make sure. Now, my next question goes to Heather. Well, Fred talked a little bit about, his story, his journey, and having to kind of find his way and try different things. And here we are. We have an actual Dr. Heather Brown, Psych D, in the room. With a lot of, how can we, when we talk about these discussions and challenges that are associated with mental health, tell us a little bit about your own journey. What inspired you to become a psychologist or psychiatrist, and how can we work as we foster these discussions? How can we build a supportive network at work, or find communities that promote mental well-being? Really, when we talk about self-care, because a lot of our stories are rooted in work. Really, it sounds like, or experiences. What are your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you. Well, I fit also. My mom was a paranoid schizophrenic. And so I grew up realizing that we lived in different realities. And so my path as a child was to try to find a way to create a bridge between hers and mine, because they were not the same. And there was a time when I was 12 where she thought the helicopters going over the house were coming to get her. My dad did what most people would do and say, Ginny, you're crazy and they're not coming to get you. And it didn't work. So as a 12-year-old, I thought, what does she need? She needed to feel safe. So I grabbed my blue blankie baby and I threw it over her head. And I said, they're not going to get you, mommy. And I held her and held her and held her until she came out. And she looked up at me with eyes that seemed to say, you believe me, which I didn't. But I got a huge download. I didn't believe her reality, but I believed she believed her reality. And my willingness to be compassionate to her truth allowed a connection to be made. In the workplace, it's the same. In life, it's the same. If we're willing to be compassionate to the people who are around us and to find out how can we connect, we can start to find pathways, whether it's through, if someone's struggling, having someone come in and speak with them, or having a support group, or having everybody rally and bring in food, or bringing in massage, or having an anonymous journaling group. There's so many things that can be done to support, as long as you ask, what is it that you need? And if we can provide it, we will. And if we can't, then we'll try to set you up with resources for you to do on your own. But if you don't ask for what you need, you're not going to get it. And so that awareness of my mom, that if I bring in compassion, I can connect with you more. And so that's what I do in my work. I turn communication on its head. I start with compassion, try to find ways to build connection. And from that, we have the conversation. And if corporate America was aware of that, we would have a very different boardroom situation.
Yeah, I think that most of these discussions, when we talk about, because I, of course, organizing this and recognizing the need for discussions about mental health as a career coach, right? I'm always going to go towards the career, but a lot of it, again, when we talk about the foundation, we spend so much time at work. We spend so much time, around other people, but there's that self-care element that was added here too. I'm going to bounce this over to Lisa and then George for comment. And then Lisa, my next question goes to you. How do you respond to what, Lisa or George, how do you respond to what Heather just mentioned in terms of, speaking up for yourself and then being able to access those resources? Because sometimes it's a matter of, yes, speaking up for yourself or being able to overcome that fear of being able to ask, right?
Right. Oftentimes, like with me, my diagnoses are bipolar 1, PTSD, and DID. And I'm blessed in a sense I'm able to articulate and assess what I need. The main thing I think will really help people, especially in terms of destigmatizing mental illness, is to have those living with mental illness that can articulate and can convey what's going on with them, act more as advocates and speak up more. I think if we can get a greater understanding between those that are not affected by mental illness directly and those that are, they'll go a long way to making sure those resources are allocated to even maybe doing some things legislatively to where we can have leave for people with mental illness. So it's a lot of work to be done, but I think that having the discussion and actually talking to people and being open and transparent about mental illness and what it's like is going to be the key to getting anything initiated.
Yeah, I really like this discussion so far in terms of where it's going. Kim taking a step back, Fred saying, okay, we need to be able to try different things, right? Because you had to figure it out. Heather saying we got to self-advocate. And so, Lisa, I'm going to get a comment from you, but then I'm also going to ask you the next question in terms of what we're hearing so far. What are your thoughts?
So the way I tend to look at it is, being a therapist, there's the piece about teaching people to advocate for themselves, but it's also about teaching entities and organizations how to be safe spaces for people who do advocate. So I think with what's happening in the mental health space, more people are becoming aware. Mental health is still stigmatized, even though we are starting to kind of chip away at some of that. But workplaces are still not designed to address mental health concerns that are coming up with employees. So the reality is we're working with people on an individual perspective and helping them build up those tools and resources, build up those skills that are going to help them know if there's a mental health crisis getting ready to occur and being able to come out of that. But we also are trying to educate organizations to be safe enough spaces where work-life balance actually exists, where, work culture is actually healthy so that people can come into work and do what they need to do in a productive and efficient way, but then return home to their families and still be able to be present. So it is a twofold piece that we have to make sure we address if we're wanting happy, healthy people walking out the doors.
Right. I think a big part of it is also the fact that our mindset in this country toward mental illness, we many of us view it as a character flaw and not as a public health crisis like it should be. So, those are another one of those little hurdles that going to need to be crossed before a lot of real change and substantive change can be initiated and take place.
Yeah. Kim, I know that you do a lot of work with this too. So I want you to guys to feel free, just like George just jumped in there, bounce off of each other. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so I actually have a program that I bring into schools and into companies where I teach them how to pause. And then there's a methodology around it where the time box comes in. And this is where they establish boundaries around themselves, their personal space, as well as their career space. So for instance, a real small piece of the puzzle is they go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And what has been done in some instances is they have established a policy around 15 minutes break in between each meeting so that they can actually take a pause and really reset. Because sometimes in those meetings, there's anger, there's anxiety, there's stress, there's pressure. And many of the people that I've talked to and interviewed said it's been, they have no time to breathe. And what's happening is our muscles are actually retaining this and staying in all of that, just like cognitive science, right? You have all these brain pathways that you're creating, well, your muscles are retaining those as well. So that's when you go into the shift. And actually I have experts that come on board and teach anger management, teach a lot of the things that these experts here in this room do. They teach, give them time to pause and actually, now that they practiced it, right? Because many people ironically have said, I don't even know what to do when I pause. And the simple technique to breathe is the first step in that. But pausing can be pausing in between speaking. So that
we've done something similar at my job, where we just try to, we call it take 10 minutes between meetings. Fred or Heather, before I ask Lisa this next question, do you have any comments on what's being said?
Sure. Everybody's brought up really good points. And I think in this post-COVID reality, we have so many people now that aren't even going to offices and they don't get recognized. Whereas maybe 5 years ago, when lessening the stigma was starting to get some traction, now we've sort of backtracked a bit and there aren't colleagues around you to say, hey, what's going on, or anything like that. And what I found in my experience is, this is just piggybacking on what I think Heather said, if you can't be afraid to ask, and you'd be surprised, people are salivating to help you. I mean, there's such a community there that we don't even know about, that people just want to help. They may not know how to help or that you actually need help, but if you ask, people will, it's like a magnet. They'll start being attracted to you, and you're just going to find a support system you never knew existed.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this next question is so relevant, Lisa, because Fred just made a great point about like the work environment being so completely different today. And even though those resources are there, right? What is it? When your company offers those additional, it'll come to my head.
Like workplace benefits or like,
yeah, I forget what it is, but a lot of companies have that. We have to take it. Like in the military, we have one source. So if you're one of my military folks listening, you can call military one source and get the additional help. I've used it plenty of times, but I want to bring this conversation away from work, right? Because I was having this conversation. I did a pre-event with Dr. Tim Hill, and we were talking about, sometimes you will see people on Facebook or just the internet in general say, well, I don't bring work home with me. I can work in any environment. I'm adaptable. I don't take that energy with me, but we spend so much time at work. And Fred, I've been a college professor. I know what it's like in teacher. I know it's like to have 30 people in the classroom taking all your energy, right? And so let's shift this conversation. And Lisa, I wanted to ask you, okay, so I'm a career coach. I deal with a lot of people who get burned out, right? And I'm sure you've seen it. People coming to you, they burned out. Kim, I'm sure, and Dr. Harris, I'm sure you've seen it as well. People are burnt out in their careers, and you're bringing this energy home, and it's impacting other areas of life. So, Lisa, that's the piece that I really want you to speak to help us transition to this conversation in terms of how, if this is happening to us, how can we discover or reconnect with our purpose in terms of trying to, one, make sure that we are not burning ourselves out, because we know that what it starts with is with burnout, being tired, stressed out, right? And that can lead to other mental health illnesses such as depression. Let me give you an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, definitely. So when I look at the burnout aspect, I typically like to break it into parts. Being that I am a therapist, I do like to utilize parts language from time to time, because when we explore with someone what their identity is, a lot of people, especially adults, their work is their identity. They are working from home. They have to work to survive. So in reality, there is no separation for them, right? This is all I know. This is what I have to do. This is what helps us live. And it's especially with COVID, when everyone was in survival mode for so long, and now we're still trying to get out of that, and our kids are still trying to get out of that. It's hard for them to separate, to see who they are and what they actually want to do. So I like to help people get back in touch with their why. You know, why did you choose the profession that you chose to go into? Was this something that you were doing because you were passionate about it? Did you want to make a difference? Or were you just doing this because you needed a paycheck? Because the way that you approach that kind of situation looks different when you know why you're there. If you know you're just going in for a paycheck, then what we might work on is building skills that helps you fortify and block out the negative pieces that come with the job. So you understand, I'm just clocking in to do what it is I got to do so I can go back home. And we help you build up that wall so that you can show up for your family, because again, you know what the purpose of this job is. But if this is something that you're passionate about, where you're like, I'm pouring my all in, like you guys mentioned, being professors, you give your all to your students when you show up. But if you give everything to them and then you go home and have nothing left, it doesn't help your family. So we look at why you've chosen a career. If you are at the point of burnout, we pull back and we explore, how do we titrate what you are doing at work so you still have enough energy to show up in the other places that you are in. So that concept of like, is the glass half empty? Is it half full? The way that you explore and look at things is going to determine how you interact with the world around you. So I like to help people see, why am I even doing this in the first place? And if I understand why I'm doing it, then I'm going to understand who I am. And once I know who I am, how I show up in the world is going to be a little different, because now I'm functioning with this world from a place that I chose versus from a place that someone told me I had to be. Does that make sense? So I think I look at it that way, because it's just easier for people to say, hey, this is what I want to do. So because this is how I want to do it, I'm going to come in, I'm going to be myself, I'm going to enjoy this and actually take on the task and it not feel like too much. Versus, I don't want to do this anyway. Like, I ain't got no choice. No one's listening to me. Nobody's on my team. I'm by myself, whatever. I make mistakes. It doesn't matter. So it's kind of my thoughts on it.
I'd love to jump in, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think schools and also employers have an interesting way to help us that we then lose in our own lives oftentimes, which is the report card or the employee review. If you think about it, you go through the different aspects of your performance, of your job, of what you're learning. But for a lot of us, if we're not getting a review at work, or let's go bigger picture, in life, how many of us take that idea of a report card and say, how am I doing in my relationship? How am I doing with my health? How am I doing financially? How am I doing socially? How am I doing physically? How am I doing communally? Most of us don't do that. And when I work with people, or companies, that's one of the things I say. What is your life mission statement? What is your couple mission statement? What is your company mission statement? And where are the attributes that are important to bring in? And then we evaluate it. If this month you didn't get any exercise, we got to make certain next month you're bringing that up. And what's going on that you're allowing yourself to not take care of yourself. But we can see the model, but in our own life, a lot of times we just kind of throw it out the window and say, well, I'll get to it when I have time. And it never happens. So where's that self-evaluation and also that support to get you back to that place where you are able to say, maybe I don't even really love my job, but it makes me a ton of money. But then I get to have the weekend with the kids, and that's my highlight. And I go to church and I'm with my family, and this provides that. That can be okay too. Our career doesn't have to be our only passion. I would hope we have many.
I 100% agree with you, Heather and Lisa. And what also is missing in this, it's not always transactional. And this is where I support people in empowering them, which we're losing. When we put these processes in place, then people are just following the apple or following something. And what I have found when I work with people one-on-one and teach them these concepts to actually practice them in their day, they start taking ownership of themselves, and then they are actually empowered to make the decisions and then find their North Star, right? And then find their value proposition and find why they are here, their legacy and their purpose, right? And there is a process around all of that so that all of a sudden, naturally, they do these great habits because they feel better about themselves. And that's what this is all about.
George, you're on mute. George, you're on mute. Fred, you want to jump in?
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Oh, I just want to say this as a person that has been dealing and living with mental illness since age 7, and how it has related to my career as an adult. I think for anyone dealing with a mental illness to really embark on any career, there has to be a strong sense of self-awareness and recognition and acceptance of your illness, of your condition. Because without that, you cannot set the boundaries that are going to lead to you being able to hold a job. I mean, a lot of times people don't talk about things such as, let's say you're bipolar, you have a job, you have an incident, you have a flare-up. That's what I call them. You may need 3 or 4 days off work. Well, if you don't have PTO, what are you going to do? We need to have employers be more tolerant and more understanding of those dealing with mental illnesses. That's where a huge part of the problem comes in, because most people I know that have mental illnesses, appreciable conditions, don't have a good work history, have trouble sustaining themselves. And to expect someone to live off of Social Security or disability is just giving them a license to starve to death. So there's so many things that we have to take care of. Even before we can get to the work-life balance, we need to figure out what's going to be best for each person and try to have people follow individual plans for their own prosperity.
I like that, George. I also want to, I guess, double up on things everybody else said, is our school models are very outdated. I mean, the way we're teaching kids, we're not teaching them how to perform in the world. You know, it's important to learn math and get your brain working and things like that. But we don't teach people how to be empathetic. We don't teach them how to be problem solvers. In the business world, it's nice that you're empowering people when they're 40 or 50 years old. But think about if you taught kids from the age of 5, 6, or 7 to look for ways to empower themselves and to ask for help. What a different world we'd be in.
Right. Well, part of the problem with our educational system, we're busy teaching kids what to think instead of how to think. And that bleeds over into so many other aspects of our life, just societally. So if we start to focus on...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
It's a challenge that we have of you need to fit in within this little box and don't you know, create a challenge and don't be any different and don't stand out. And then we say, but be yourself. It doesn't work. We also get the people-pleasing model.
Exactly.
Don't be weak. Don't have a challenge. Don't struggle. You know, you need to be strong. You need to be tough. Don't break down. Don't cry. We're dehumanizing who we are. And then we don't feel that we even have a right to have struggles or challenges. And why would you raise your hand? I'm struggling. Oh my God, you're going to be ostracized.
And I'll say this about, and this is, I'm very passionate about the mental illness aspect because of my testimony. But, you know, the funny thing is that people oftentimes, and this is especially true on jobs, I can tell you stories about this, but, you know, the thing about having a mental illness is that people always want you to act as though you don't. And that's very difficult as well. And I think that post-COVID, since we're seeing a bigger focus on mental illness, I think we're going to see it more and more. I think we're going to see more legislation. I think we're going to see more societal trends, and that begins with discussions like these. But it's very difficult to sustain employment dealing with a chronic mental illness, especially one like bipolar. It's so difficult, but we have to find solutions and ways to accommodate people where they can live and be well.
I do want to throw something out before we jump in, because this is something for the audience just to reflect on. When I work with people, I always make sure I ask them, what did your parents do? Because a lot of times the way that we function comes from what we grew up in. It comes from what our parents grew up in. And it's literally passed down until it becomes culture, until it becomes part of our DNA that we're just functioning and moving specific ways. I know there's the systems piece that comes in, but I really like to challenge people with, what did your parents do? And are you replicating the same things? Were they successful with that? And are you being successful with that? Because I know the original question asked about rediscovering and discovering yourself. And I honestly believe a lot of people don't know themselves because they followed the rules that were written before they were even born. And those rules were written by people who were writing them before they were even born. And the idea is we don't know who we are because we never had rules for ourselves. We didn't create our own rules. So if you had an honest conversation with your parents and you ask them, why did you do those things? Why do we have these beliefs that we have as a family? Why do we apply these things as part of our family dynamic or family culture? You'll find that you start to see where your views differ and you can start to understand yourself a little bit better.
I think that I can just actually, I was going to throw this next question out at Heather, but I think that you guys can bounce off of each other because Lisa, too, you made a great point. And so when we talk about this concept of self-care and asking these questions of why these things are rooted this way, I want to start this discussion on not only the advocacy piece, but I want to go back to something Fred said in the beginning about exploring options and just trying to figure it out, right? So here we have all of these experts in the room. And so bouncing off what you just said, Lisa, I want to ask this question. When we talk about asking about these boxes or that point you just made, you know, what is when people face challenges, just general, right? Like that's because that's always the foundations of some. There's diagnosed mental disorders, and then there's things that can lead to mental health disorders like depression because maybe we are facing challenges like burnout, stress and then burnout, right? And then so let's talk about some techniques, right? And you guys take a moment again, you bouncing off each other. what techniques do you recommend for reframing challenges and cultivating a more positive and resilient mindset? Now, the original question was at work, but I'm gonna just say in general, right? Because the foundation of this is like there are some diagnoses that we know up front, but then just for the everyday person who just might be experiencing life, and like you're saying, not being afraid to ask those questions, we're going to come across challenges. Things are going to happen. So how do we keep ourselves from becoming overwhelmed and actually proactively manage our mindset? And you guys can, again, bounce off each other, go around the room. But let me start with Lisa with that question.
So I think a part of what I explore with people is like the aspects of positive psychology. So it's that component of being real. We know life sucks for some people. Like it's not, a lot of us are in flight mode. We're in survival mode. We're just trying to make it. We're living paycheck to paycheck. We're not going to pretend like that's not happening. I'm not going to get you to be successful when you're like, I got bills to pay and I got children to feed. So the reality is I'm not going to negate that and pretend like that doesn't exist, because that is affecting your system. What I am going to do is teach you how to regulate your system. So when life is hitting you, it doesn't hit you as hard, because I can't control what you're experiencing in life. So things like that look like going inward and being able to check in with yourself, deep breathing techniques, slowing things down, because sometimes the hustle bustle that comes with life, we almost forget to catch our breath. I can't tell you the number of times I've had clients come into the therapy room and it's like for the first time they're actually breathing. They've slowed down enough that they're like, okay, what are we talking about now? Because everything's been ripping and running and they've been in survival mode so fast that even their own body hasn't been able to catch up with the things that are expected of them. So we take a minute to check in and say, one, how are you actually doing? Is your body actually in this room? Is your mind in this room? And as they slow things down, they recognize where it is that they have to take time to reset. But then in resetting, I like to use the components of positive psychology, because life is going to suck, whether we want it to or not. But we can choose to focus on the negative, and then that changes how we see everything else. Or we can choose to say, you know what, that day was bad, but I still have another day to try again and have something go better. So it's the idea of choosing what we are intentionally going to give our focus to, so that more things can stem from that.
I'm going to hand it over to Fred, and then I'm going to come back to you, Heather, okay? And then I want to go to Kim and George, okay? Fred, let me hand it off to you. Make a quick comment and hand it back to Heather, okay?
Sure. One of the things that has helped me the most is intermittent fasting. Now, I'm not a physician, and I'm not giving you any medical advice. You have to go find your own professionals for this. But it has helped reset my entire body, from hormones and muscles to just allowing me to hear my own body and get in touch with my own mindfulness. And it's been incredibly powerful. And most doctors know about it and they poo-poo it because they don't make any money off it. But I've seen thousands of people through my friends' Facebook groups, and we had over 500,000 members. I've seen people's lives turn around. I've seen my life turn around. And you have to give yourself that option. I mean, there's probably the biggest lesson I've learned from this is we're all an experiment of one. And, you know, the 8 suggestions that might work for Kim won't work for George, or they won't work for Heather, but they might work for you. And you have to keep rotating your way through these systems and giving them a chance to work, and then see what type of experiment you are, because that's really what life is. We're all one big experiment of one that has to exist in this experiment of 7 or 8 billion.
Well, and I have I agree with that completely. And then I have a different portion that I think is important, and it goes off of what Lisa says. I think going to the place of giving yourself the opportunity to really land into yourself, do a lot of grounding work, a lot of breathing work, but coming to the place of what is your mind chatter? What is the thought that's going on inside of your head? And then also to help people recognize that at this moment, I'm feeling anxious. At this moment, I'm feeling overwhelmed. But that does not mean I am always anxious. I am always depressed. I am always struggling. And I think if we were to let go of, if you will, those places where we get trapped in, if I'm in a depressive place in my life, that doesn't mean I'm constantly struggling with depression, even bipolar. You're going to have times when you're in cycle, you're going to have times you're out of cycle. And we brand people then we are fearful and shameful of ourselves instead of going from the other side, which is I am which I am. And I can try to do as much as I possibly can to help myself with this. But if I reject who I truly am or what I truly need, I'm not going to do well. And so if we could help people come from the other side of what is your body like? What is your emotional state like? What is your psychological state like? And what can you do with that? And what is best for you to do with that? Because your moment, your situation, your life is going to be different every single day. And as it was said, different from everybody else. So you've got to find what works for you. What George said, so incredibly important. He might need to take 3 days off. And if he needs to be able to come back and continue. So that place of self-advocacy, self-awareness, and letting it be okay to take care of yourself. It's crazy that it's not okay to take care of yourself.
Well, you know, people, it's so easy for, I think people misconstrue self-care with selfishness. With me, I phrase it as it being a matter of self-interest. And I think one thing too, especially in those dealing with mental illness and trying to work or trying to function, you have to have an emergency plan. You need to know, hey, if things go left, if I have an incident, if I have a flare up, I need to go to this hospital. I need to notify this person. I need to call this person on the job, because that's when we usually, especially on a job, that's when it goes bad. When you have a flare up and you don't have systems in place to notify your employer, you don't have ways to contact who you need to contact. So I think people living with mental illness that are trying to embark on their corporate world or any job need to make sure they have a plan in place to where when something does happen, because no matter how much you're in therapy, no matter how much medication, with something like bipolar, they're going to be bad times. So we have to be prepared for those. And so when they do happen, they don't impede us or damage us too much.
Yeah. And to add to, I mean, I agree with every single one of you. You're just saying different words than what actually I am doing myself. But I think one thing is really, really critical is to have that people network around you, so that you always have that tie-in. So then if something, you know, is going to show up in your world, that you can reach out to them, or they're reaching out to you and they're always with you along the way. That's what we're here for. That's what we are all here for, right? And I know the intermittent fasting, Fred, totally. And I experienced that as a menopausal person. I went through that for 20 years of I didn't know what the heck was going on. And then when I started to manage that proactively, it's all about proactive. And I'm saying this, it's not like being a push. And that's the other third item that I want to share is when you feel like you're pushing yourself, that's when we get in danger. And if we can be in that breath and that mindfulness, like even if you're in the hustle, I mean, I have worked with people where they're giving me an update and they're in the car and they'll get out of the car and all of a sudden all this noises around them and you can just see the franticness around them. And then they know the practices where they have to say, okay, I need to pause for a minute and close my eyes and just stop and breathe.
Right. And you have to take those moments.
Yes.
Because one thing I experienced is in part of my recovery, I've learned to kind of slow down a little bit, especially being bipolar, not be so frantic. And it frustrates people. They're like, you're moving too slow. It's like, no, I'm moving at the pace that I need to move at for me. If you have a problem with it, you can seek other company, but I'm moving at the pace that's going to be best for me. And we have to not be afraid to do that, stand up for ourselves.
I really love what you just said. I'm actually going to just throw out the last question for everybody to continue to kind of share their perspective. Now, we talked about all of these things in terms of you being able to, I wish we had more time to take this conversation beyond an hour, right? But the intent of this was to just get started. And so there'll be people who are coming back to listen to us. We're sharing resources in the chat. They'll have access to all of your information. And then, of course, we'll be on tomorrow continuing these discussions about creating psychologically safe workplaces. But a lot of what you guys have pointed out tonight is the importance of, one, being open-minded to try different things, 2, learning to advocate for yourself, 3, I love what you said, Lisa, about questioning the why, or why does it have to be this way, or, you know, going back to really the roots. And in fact, when I do my own events, I'm always titling it something like Rooted in Resiliency. So I'm going to ask one final question. Since, George, you were the last person to speak, I'm going to direct this question towards you. But again, you know, guys, we're bouncing off of each other. And so I want everybody to give some input. All right, so with all of the things that we've talked about, the stigma that's associated with mental health, all of the things that we've talked about in terms of, advocating and asking questions for yourself, let's just like end this conversation with some practical techniques, right? And then after we get answers for this last question, I'm going to ask you guys to keep your answers that, George, you give the initial answer, but keep your answers between 30 to 60 seconds. 30 to 40 seconds for the follow-up. And then we'll do a final around the room to close out this initial the part of the summit. But I want to talk about in terms of building resiliency and bouncing back. I posed this question to Lisa earlier, and she started this portion of the conversation. But now I'm going to just kind of hit on when we're talking about this bouncing back or being able to manage our mental health. I want to get some practical tools and techniques that you're using for managing your mental health and things that you recommend. So George, we're going to start with you, and then we'll go to Fred, and we'll just bounce around the room.
Right. Well, I know the typical answer people might be thinking may be something like scented candles, aromatherapy, yoga, and that's all useful. But to me, what's been the most powerful thing has been me educating myself about my condition and talking to others that are living with it and being present in my feelings, journaling, doing things, and not being in denial or afraid of what's going on inside me. So basically educating yourself, that's really, knowledge is the most powerful thing that we have. And if you're living with a condition, then it behooves you to be as educated as possible, because with that knowledge, you can develop your coping system, you can develop your routine, you can develop your emergency plan. So without that knowledge, you really can't do much.
Fred?
I agree 100%. I also think we have a resiliency gene and a resiliency muscle, and that, like any other muscle, has to be worked on. And going back to the intermittent fasting, when I was coaching people, I would tell them you have to feed your brain as much as you have to feed your belly. And part of feeding your brain is getting yourself away from those toxic foods, those vegetable oils that are really not vegetable at all, and those highly processed foods and sugars. Just cutting down on those by even 30% will make a marked difference in your life. And then when you cut it down another 5%, and you will feel so much better.
Okay. Heather?
Mine will tie into what you said, Christy, of rootedness. And it's really guiding people and taking that time to get into yourself and to get into your body. Breath work, grounding work, inner child work, meditation, all of the things to help you find out where you are. Because when you find out where you are, then you can attend to what your body needs. If you aren't finding out exactly where you are, you're in crisis mode and you're in panic mode, and that's not the best time to act. So taking a little bit of time to tap into, and then having that ability to keep helping yourself explore that day in and day out, to start to see more and more how you were doing and how you were feeling and how you're integrating everything. And especially to get to that place of peace and quiet within your brain as much as you can, so that you can receive the wisdom that wants to drop in through you and to you and for you to utilize for your better good.
And Lisa, I really want to go back to something you said as you answered this question, because the reality of these conversations is, especially from a career coach perspective, we always will have people that are having challenges with their job, right? And the reality of it is, if you got bills to pay, you're not going to be able to just quit. And so for all of the tools that have been offered by Heather and Fred and George and Kim, let's piggyback on, what you mentioned earlier. But I just want to make sure that when we're having these conversations, all of these tools, guys, some of them are free. You can journal for free. You can just find a piece of paper, right? And start writing that stuff down, what Dr. Brown just said, right? So you can breathe for free. Breathing is free. You can go to YouTube University. You can find resources to help you. You got ChatGPT. Ask it, for some mindfulness techniques. You can go. We stopped Career Coach RX, but we have all kinds of meditations on there. The YouTube page is still up. So I want to, Lisa, in asking that question, I just want to make sure that whether you're listening now, or you're listening in the future, that you know that even though we have all of these experts here, we're telling you to start where you are and with what you have, right? And so let me give that over to Lisa to piggyback off of that and answer.
I was like, y'all, she set me up. So I was gonna say something earlier, and I'll tie it into this. So I was like, self-care is a safe word. If you guys think about it, when people talk about self-care, they feel more pleasant and bubbly. But when they talk about boundaries, when they talk about saying no, when they talk about advocating for themselves, people get a little ick. So I just throw it out there because I want to make sure people understand people are going to use terminology that feels safe for them. But either way, you still have to do the other pieces. You still have to advocate for yourself. You still have to make sure you check in and you speak on what's happening. The other side of that is healing is important. Because I use the analogy of, when you get a scrape on your knee as a kid and then someone puts a Band-Aid on it, but they say if you leave the Band-Aid off, it heals faster than if you cover it with the Band-Aid. That is healing for your body. The brain's number one job is to keep you alive regardless of what you experience and regardless of what you go through. So if you give your brain the ability to do what it's designed to do, you are going to bounce back. And sometimes that means you have to be honest with yourself. You have to go where it feels uncomfortable. You have to acknowledge that you on the crisp of having been in that oven too long, that you ain't got nothing left, so that you can actually give yourself enough space to heal. Because sometimes when you're going through the motions, you're making yourself sicker than if you took a pause back to see how you could reset your life, reset your schedule, so that you could do the very same thing you're doing differently. Sometimes it just takes that, as I know Miss Kim is going to say, that pause to check in and be able to see, this is what I need to do to reset the way that I'm approaching this piece so that I won't have to get sick, so that I won't have to worry about being burnt out. So I look at it from the lens of, how do you heal? How do you make sure that you meditate, that you journal, that you take the right medications, that you eat the right foods so that your body and that your brain can get the things that it needs organically through everyday experiences to heal your system? Because resilience is just the word that we use to cope with trauma. And at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we are addressing what's happening to us with every experience we have so that we can be healthy, so that our kids can be healthy, so our communities can be healthy.
All right. So now I'd like you all to play along with me because I'm going to answer the how. I want each of you to close your eyes and let everything we talked about settle in. Think about the places that you want to take your life, the ways you want to grow, change, build, experience. Let everything sink in. And now take that first step and breathe. Take that first step and join me. Take that first step and pause.
I loved it.
All right.
So now I feel a little bit odd because I don't know if anyone else actually closed their eyes.
I didn't close my eyes, but I think
Okay, as long as you...
I might fall asleep. But I mean, listen, breathing is free, right? And listen, if you guys have not had an opportunity to hear Kim's story, Kim was one of my first podcast guests when I launched the Career Coach Artist podcast, and we spent a good amount of time talking about what inspired her and how she got into her movement. So we'll definitely, that is on the Work Solutions website. But guys, this has been such a great start to the discussion. I wish it could have went longer. I'm going to stop us right here. I'm going to go back to Fred because now we're going to do our 2-minute plugs. We're going to tell people what we have coming up, and we're going to prepare ourselves for continuing this discussion tomorrow. So Fred, give us, as I do with every event I host, give us your words of wisdom, blessings from today, and tell us where you're going to be, where people can find you, and we'll also be sharing your information in the chat.
Well, that's a lot to pack in 2 minutes or less. So you can find me on Amazon with my book, The Summer I Died 20 Times. It's available in paperback, in Kindle, and now an audiobook with someone reading it that sounds nothing like me. So it's really, really a weird sensation. And I have a small Instagram, repeatedly DF. So repeatedly Dead Fred, which is my nickname. Or you can find me on LinkedIn at Fred Ruttman. And I also have my own little podcast, the Dead Man Walking Podcast, which is available on Spotify and YouTube and, all the big podcast channels. So if you want to find me and potentially be a guest or have me on your show, please connect with me. I'd be happy to talk to you. And Christy, thank you for organizing this. And to all the other hosts, you guys are amazing. Great information.
Any final words of wisdom, Fred?
Yeah, I'm kind of stuck on this thing from Dr. Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. And, he went through the concentration camps and everything. And he came out of it the most positive man in the world. And to summarize his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he says, if you have hope, you can conquer almost anything. And hope, like breathing, it's free. The supply chain hasn't gotten to it. It's out there. It's just a matter of if you want to grab it and how much you want to grab it.
I love that. Heather?
Thank you. This has been wonderful. And I've loved meeting all of you. So thank you. Easiest way to find more about me or to work with me is my website, www.drhetherbrowne.com. You can find my book, my TEDx, my newsletter. I have an entire page of freebies, so go grab them. I have an entire page of media links to watch podcasts and articles that I've been in. But obviously my book, Speaking with the Heart, which has been out for a couple of months. It's on compassionate communication for couples. That's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Viktor Frankl is an absolute love of mine. So I'm so glad you've mentioned that. And the thing that I like to say is a yes is also a no. And I think if we were to be told that, we would realize that if I say yes to you, on one hand, I am to say no to me. So we feel fearful of boundaries. We feel fearful of making choices for ourselves. But if you do one, it's the opposite. Same thing for self-love. I can say it's hard to love myself, or I can say it's as easy as not loving myself. I hate myself. I love myself. It's a choice for us to make. And my viewpoint is, I only have this one life. And so why would I not want to try to take care of me as best as possible, love me as much as possible, and look at those places where I struggle with that to figure out that little puzzle of me? I hope the day I die, God says, what do you think? And I just say, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for letting me be Heather. And then he's going to say, did you do everything you wanted? And I'm going to say, hell no. But what a great experience and hard experience this has been. And within the two of those is the blessedness of love.
Thank you. That was so powerful. I'm going to be thinking about when you say yes to somebody else, you're saying no to yourself, right? And guys, we're going to talk a little bit about this tomorrow too. But what she just said in terms of like establishing boundaries, that was brought up tonight. And I also love the fact that we're saying like, hey, it just starts with a breath. Like I'm taking notes in my head, right? Breathing is free. Establish your boundaries. When you say yes to somebody else, you're kind of saying no to yourself, right? Lisa, what are your words of wisdom and how can we contact you?
Hello. So you guys can check us out on our website, www.𝗂𝗶𝗱ℎ_LLC.com. We are on Instagram as 𝗂𝗶𝗵_therapy, and I'm on LinkedIn as Lisa Bickley. I want to say thank you, Ms. Christy, for allowing me to be on today. This was an awesome experience. And I believe my biggest words of wisdom that I want to tell everyone is please heal. People are hurting. Adults, kids, communities, like we're all struggling at the end of the day. And if one person just took a minute to check in with the neighbor, if an employer just took a minute to slow things down and make sure their people are good, we just might have a world that sucks a little less. So, my plea is for people to just slow down enough to really make sure that you're good, make sure that your kids are good, because we are passing down some bad stuff, y'all. And I primarily work with kids, so I see it a lot. Our kids are struggling too. So please heal. My thing would be, if you're not sure what that means, if you're not sure what that looks like, visit our website and let's start the discussion. We will help you get connected to who you need to get connected to so that you can start the process, and no one has to know. So the journey of life is for you. It's your life. It will never be the same as anybody else's, regardless of who's in it with you. So that's my thing. Please heal.
Powerful. 2 words. Powerful. Right?
On a shirt. Please heal.
Kim.
Yeah. So one takeaway is reach out to one of us and get support, get some kind of help, just so that you have that connection. We're all here to help you. I have a free book, my ebook, which is the Time Box that you can download. And then I'm doing a weekly, every Wednesday night gathering to actually practice the pause, teach about it a little during this month. And when you sign up for the book, on the thank you page, it actually gives you the link to access that time. And my words of wisdom is pause, step away, and breathe.
I love that. Pause, step away, and breathe. Please heal. Please heal by pausing, stepping away, and breathing. Don't forget to try new stuff. Journal. So one concise sentence, right? Again, all of the tools and tips that are being shared with you guys are starter points. They're free, right? And advocating for yourself. So George, I gotta let you give that last comment in terms of where you're gonna be next, what's happening. But start with your words of wisdom because you got plenty of them, brother.
Yeah, well, my main one is gonna be better to yourself. Of course, we live in society with other people. We have to treat each other well. But I think if we focus a little bit more on our self-care, our self-awareness, and do things that are going to benefit us and actually invest in ourselves, we'll be a lot better off. But it was an honor to be here. Thank you all for having me. Thank you all for this experience. My name is George P. Brooks, CEO and founder of Meta Association. You can reach me on Facebook under George P. Brooks. I'm a public speaker. I'm a writer. I'm an actor. I'm doing a lot of different things, but everything I do is for the purpose of improving the lives of those living with mental illness. So if that's your passion, if that's what you want, if that is what you aspire to do, please reach out to me. You can reach me at 214-675-1177, or you can email me at gbrooks@metaassociation.org. And there's also our site, also www.metaassociation.org. So George Brooks, once again, thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
I want to say a special thank you to all of our guests who came tonight. And of course, I have to plug Work Solutions, the WORXK solutions.com. We support, I am a social impact career coach. We focus on supporting mission-driven individuals and organizations. We do events such as the social impact events where we're talking about mental health. You'll see us, we did the Black Health Summit most recently. We also hosted a women's podcast, Blitz for Women's History Month. We just posted the events page in the chat, so be able to check us out. Be sure to check us out. We have a few upcoming workshops where we're going to be focusing on building resiliency. My favorite title for Black women who have considered walking out when the seat at the table wasn't enough. We'll be doing a resiliency workshop on that, and then we'll also be hosting an event where we're partnering with churches to do career development workshops. So, guys, tune in tomorrow for part 2. 11:30 to 12:30 p.m. We realized that this was only a 1-hour conversation, but it's over 2 days, right? These were just tidbits to get you started, to get you thinking. We gave you important things. Advocating for yourselves. Advocating, speaking up is free. You have a voice. Don't be afraid to do it. And then also being realistic. If you are a business owner, if you work in a corporate environment, if you are in a high position, think about the support services that you're currently providing to your employees in terms of how you can better help and how you can accommodate them. And tomorrow we'll be talking about, again, mental health advocacy and creating psychologically safe work environments. So thank you for tuning in today. We will again we encourage you to fill out the survey for today. Thank you to each of our speakers. It was an honor and a pleasure to work with you. This event will be available for replay on our YouTube channel as well as the Work Solutions website. And you can connect with all of our speakers. Their information was posted here in the chat, as well as been made available on the Work Solutions website. Again, WORXKsolutions.com. Thank you and have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow at 11:30 for part 2.